They handcuffed him in the street, accusing him of a crime he didn't commit, all because of the color of his skin. His family watched his life fall apart, but Marcus Wilson refused to be broken. What he did next shocked everyone. But let's start from the beginning. Marcus Wilson, a highly respected architect, known for his groundbreaking designs and impeccable reputation, was driving home after a grueling day at work. Exhausted yet satisfied with the progress made during a high-stakes business meeting, he looked forward to spending the evening with his wife, Lauren, and their young daughter, Emma. The quiet drive through the dimly lit streets of his suburban neighborhood was interrupted by the sudden blare of a siren and flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror. Confused but compliant, Marcus pulled over, unsure of what he had done to warrant this stop. Two officers, Jackson and Miller, approached his car, their expressions cold and intimidating. "Step out of the vehicle," Officer Jackson barked. Marcus hesitated, his mind racing to figure out what this could possibly be about. "You fit the description of a suspect who robbed a jewelry store earlier tonight," Officer Miller added, his tone laced with accusation. Marcus blinked, stunned. He had spent the entire evening in a downtown conference room surrounded by clients and colleagues. There were even security cameras at the building to confirm his alibi. Trying to keep his composure, Marcus calmly responded, "This has to be a mistake. I was at a business meeting downtown. I can prove it." But his words fell on deaf ears. The officers' glares grew harsher, their posture more aggressive. It became painfully clear that they had already made up their minds. "Enough," Jackson snapped, yanking Marcus out of the car. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into his wrists as Miller shoved him against the hood of his car. A small crowd of onlookers began to gather, their phones raised to capture the scene. Marcus felt the burn of humiliation as strangers whispered and pointed. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but what hit him hardest was the overwhelming sense of helplessness. In that moment, he realized the system wasn't designed to listen to men like him. It was designed to silence them. The next morning, Marcus Wilson wakes up in a cold, damp jail cell. The hard metal cot beneath him offers no comfort, and the gray walls seem to close in, amplifying the weight of his situation. Sleep had been elusive, his mind consumed by thoughts of his wife, Lauren, and their young daughter, Emma. He imagines Lauren frantically calling anyone who might know where he is, while Emma, too young to fully understand, wonders why her father hasn't come home. The thought of their worry twists like a knife in his chest. The harsh sound of the cell door clanging open pulls him from his thoughts. His lawyer, Eliza Carter, steps inside, her expression a mix of determination and unease. A rising star in criminal defense, Eliza had taken on cases like Marcus's before, battles against a system all too eager to convict before hearing the truth. But even she seems shaken as she begins to speak. "Marcus," she starts, her tone measured but serious. "The police claim they have evidence against you." She slides a file across the table. Inside are grainy images from a security camera, blurry, distorted frames of a man who bears only a vague resemblance to Marcus. His stomach churns as he looks at the photos, realizing how easily this could be spun to fit the officer's narrative. "This isn't me," he says, his voice firm but tinged with despair. "I know," Eliza replies, "but they're pushing it hard. They're framing this as a slam dunk for the prosecution." Marcus feels his world tilting. His career, meticulously built over years of hard work, his spotless reputation, his role as a husband and father, all of it hangs by a thread. He recalls his father's voice from years ago, urging him to stand strong in the face of injustice. But in this moment, the weight feels insurmountable. The pain of being falsely accused, of being reduced to nothing more than a stereotype because of his skin color, cuts deeper than he ever imagined. Eliza Carter knew that proving Marcus's innocence meant going beyond the obvious. She started her investigation with unrelenting determination, retracing every moment of his evening. After days of work, she found her first breakthrough: a cab driver who had dropped Marcus off at his home just minutes after his business meeting. The driver confirmed the time and location, giving Marcus a solid alibi. It was the first tangible piece of evidence that cast doubt on the police's narrative. But Eliza didn't stop there. She managed to obtain security footage from the restaurant where Marcus had been attending his meeting. The grainy footage showed Marcus leaving the restaurant at the exact time he claimed. His suit, his demeanor, everything matched his testimony. These records not only contradicted the officer's timeline, but also proved Marcus couldn't possibly have been at the jewelry store when the robbery occurred. Armed with this evidence, Eliza presented her findings in court. Her arguments were clear and methodical, pointing out the inconsistencies in the police's accusations. However, officers Jackson and Miller fought back aggressively. They tried to discredit the cab driver, painting him as unreliable. They dismissed the restaurant footage as inconclusive, arguing that the timing still left room for doubt. Their strategy was simple: sow uncertainty and protect their version of events at any cost. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the tide began to turn. A video of Marcus's humiliating arrest, filmed by bystanders, surfaced on social media. The footage captured the blatant bias of the officers and the unnecessary force they used during the arrest. The video quickly went viral, sparking outrage across the nation. People began to rally behind Marcus, sharing his story and demanding accountability from law enforcement. Activists, legal experts, and everyday citizens united in support, calling for justice and systemic reform. For the first time since his nightmare began, Marcus felt a spark of hope. The weight on his shoulders lightened, if only slightly, as he realized he was no longer fighting alone. The truth was gaining momentum, and with it came the possibility of reclaiming his life. The day of the trial was heavy with tension. Marcus Wilson sat beside his lawyer, Eliza Carter, in the packed courtroom, his heart pounding as he thought of his wife and daughter sitting just behind him. This was his moment, the one chance to prove his innocence and reclaim his life. When it was Eliza's turn to speak, she stood confidently, her voice steady and clear as she delivered a masterful case. She began by presenting the restaurant's security footage, meticulously walking the jury through the timestamps, proving that Marcus had been at his meeting during the time of the robbery. Next, she introduced the cab driver's testimony. His recounting of the night, the pickup, the route, and the exact drop-off time at Marcus's home left no room for doubt. Finally, Eliza dropped the bombshell, a forensic analysis exposing how the evidence submitted by officers Jackson and Miller had been doctored. The jury sat in stunned silence as she revealed the officers' blatant attempt to frame an innocent man. The courtroom felt like it held its breath as the jury left to deliberate. Minutes stretched into hours until, at last, they returned. The foreperson stood and delivered the verdict: not guilty. The room erupted in cheers, tears of relief streaming down Lauren's face as she hugged Emma tightly. Marcus felt his legs weaken as the weight of weeks of humiliation, fear, and uncertainty finally lifted. He turned to embrace his wife and daughter as supporters applauded and shouted their joy. Outside, the crowd cheered his name, holding signs that read, "Justice for Marcus" and "End Racial Injustice." The fallout was swift. Officers Jackson and Miller were dismissed from the force and later charged with falsifying evidence. It was a small but significant victory against a system that had failed too many for too long. But Marcus didn't stop there. Determined to turn his pain into progress, he launched a nationwide campaign advocating for police reform. He shared his story in interviews, conferences, and rallies, calling for better training, accountability, and systemic change. His resilience became a symbol of hope, inspiring others to demand justice and fight for a world where no one else would endure what he had.